feel like finally getting back to me, my art. All I want to do is art. And the other thing is that I love stories. So like to me, art is in everything. Your art is your voice, your speaking, your connection. You can feel everyone's energy. That's your art. It's the art of living to me. So art and hustle to me is the art of living and art of it and everything.
I hope that you cut that piece right there and make it your intro and your outro, because that was dope.
Welcome to the Art and Hustle podcast, a gallery of conversations, a space where you can hear all the amazing stories and life lessons of my guests. I'm your host, LindaLCheung, fashion designer turned multimedia artist, and I want to give you a space to tell your story.
Okay, here we go. Don't you look cute this morning? What's different?
Thank you.
Different glasses? Maybe different glasses must be it.
Different glasses. I curled my hair.
Okay.
And different costume jewelry.
Whoa, mama.
Yes.
Okay, looking good. Okay, so now, let me see. Okay, I want you to notice every time we do, I have a new shirt every time.
Mm-hmm.
I told you I have 169 shirts.
I know. So each shirt we're going to have on each podcast. So we got to get through all of the 169 that you have.
I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to live that long.
Yes, you are.
So now,
welcome to the Art and Hustle podcast, Gallery of Conversations. We have my amazing, fabulous Hawaiian wearing shirt, Captain Schiavo. Welcome again here.
Yes, thank you very much for that introduction.
Yes, thank you. And so today we're going to talk about fathers and kids who do not have them, and how that affects them in their life. And you've always told me that your father was amazing. And I'd love to know more about him and his childhood, where he was from.
Sure.
Is like, you told me that he was an orphan. So I'd love to know more about that.
Well, my father was, first of all, in terms of the psychologist, they always, if you go to a psychiatrist or a therapist or stuff, right away they'll say, well, how about your mother?
Mm-hmm.
What was your relationship with your mother? What was she like? And of course, mothers get condemned unfairly, I think, by these psychiatrists, because the notion was, especially in the old days, that kids spent more time with their mothers than their fathers because mothers. I remember when I was a kid, it was my mother worked, okay, and that was not the norm back then. She was always a working woman, and that was great. That's a whole other story. But
I can just imagine why that's great.
Oh, you have no idea. All right, anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, but also because she was tough. She was tough, and so it was it was less time to be harassed, controlled, whatever. My father.
So one question with that is like, what was her hours normally for working? Since I wonder if it coincides to women who work now, mothers who work now.
She was really a woman of business. She was a translator. She was an office manager.
Yeah.
She was fluent in English, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Portuguese and some French. Yeah. She started off in the import-export business, so she had to speak on the phone with these people and also write letters and and make sure that they were grammatical and articulate.
Wow.
She was a very, very bright woman. She graduated from high school a year early. I think she graduated a year early. I have a bunch of her medallions, academic awards.
And what college did she go to?
That's another horror story. She had a free whole shot at Hunter College, okay, which she couldn't do because her mother was dying had heart disease brought on by rheumatic fever. In those days, rheumatic fever, if it wasn't found early enough and treated properly, you'd get severe cardiac problems and die of the cardiac problems. Wow. So as a consequence, she had to, take care of her dying mother and also basically raise her younger siblings.
Yeah.
But going back to your original question, she worked really basically 9 to 5, and of course we used to get home from high school. Let's say we were home 3-ish. Okay.
Yeah.
So there was only 2 hours where we were kind of by ourselves for,
Mm.
during the
Hmm.
week, and then we were
Yeah.
supposed to start dinner and stuff, cook and get it, which we did from the time I was 12. I started doing that.
Really?
But where my father comes in,
Hmm.
and where fathers in general come in, I said it when I was a younger person, not really knowing too much,
Hmm.
and not having studied much like psychology and things. But I felt that fathers, they don't have to do much; they just have to be there. Or you have to, if your father go, like my father went to work, he would leave the house at 4 o'clock in the morning to get the train, right?
Yeah.
And then he wouldn't come home. He would come home almost exactly 10 minutes to 6. He'd walk from the train station because it was
Mm.
close by where we were.
Yeah.
And but the point was, and if he didn't come home at 10 to 6, we all got nervous. We all got
Yeah.
worried.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, and my sister and I, when we were younger, we'd ride down the street on our bicycles, waiting for him to, make turn the corner,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he was the kind of father too where he'd always have something in his pockets to give us when he came home.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
sweet. So you
yeah,
you ride up and bite to him.
yeah,
They're like,
because
okay, what you got for me, Dad?
yeah, exactly. And we're jumping up, and we're like, "What's in his
Yeah.
pockets?" We're grabbing his jacket to see what he's got. You might have had
Oh, that's so
candy, you
sweet.
might have had candy bars or chewing
Yeah.
gum, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
that kind of a father. So
Oh.
anyway, but like I said, fathers just have to be there
Hmm.
because, and what happens is about, even if they have the personality of mushrooms or
Hmm.
doorknobs, you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
Because some fathers are very distant and stolid, and but they represent what most young men need, and that's security. In other words, when I always knew my mother and father were coming home, and that even if they were arguing like cats and dogs on the
Yeah.
weekend, let's say, okay,
Yeah.
they weren't going anyplace,
Hmm.
okay. And the level of security that my sister and I that we grew up with was something which it took me a while to really appreciate it when I was teaching how so many young people without us two parents. And by
Yeah.
the way, I knew wonderful, wonderful single parents, single
Yeah.
mothers, single fathers, grandparents. I mean, in Central Islip, we had many, many grandparents who were raising their grandchildren because their children either they died or they wound up getting drug addicted or whatever. They took the responsibility
Yeah.
upon themselves, and they did it really, really well.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't have any hard and fast rules about you need two parents. And no, I don't get that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about though the importance of fathers. So okay, so now my father was he was yes, he was always there. Okay, but also because he was an orphan, and this is the key, uh, he was a natural parent. He didn't learn any bad, weird stuff from his parents.
Yeah.
Okay, so where my mother, her father was very difficult, and
That's
uh,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
To
and
break it down that way. Yeah.
but what she learned about parenting, and most young parents learn, they know from their own experience with parents or lack thereof. Okay, so they may learn a lot of bad habits, and there are all kinds of different uh, philosophies about parenting. Some are very, very authoritarian. Some are very more laissez-faire, more laid back. Uh, and 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 oddly enough, I could argue that I don't know that ultimately it means too much, because what I found from dealing with young people like yourself when you're in school is that once you get to a certain age, again, your peers are more important than your parents, right? And what your peers have to say and how you relate to them becomes more of an issue. And where the parents come in is if they instilled in their kids all the values and the morality and ethics up to the point where they're 12, that gets those young people through junior high school, and college. And then if the parents are lucky, they'll like a bungee cord, they'll snap back to the positions where their parents would hope they would be as adults.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, because he was a natural parent, he didn't have all these, I don't know, what I felt with bad habits. He just was he was a natural.
He didn't
He just
learn all the negative. So he didn't. Yeah, he didn't learn any negative things from the father or the mother, right?
Oh no, and look, let me get it clear. My father was I mean, I never knew, and my sister would agree, we never knew a child or an animal that didn't automatically gravitate to my father. Dogs,
Oh.
cats. I mean, he had this warmth and humanity and a
Mhm.
very dry sense of humor. And
Oh,
I'm
like
telling
yours?
you,
Is that where you get your humor?
oh, absolutely, no question about it. I don't know that my mother had a great sense of humor, but my
Mhm.
father, he was.
Yeah.
I'll give you a perfect. He was so sly and dry. I'll give you a
Mhm.
perfect example of this.
Mhm.
He was near the end of his life, and he was being interviewed by some healthcare professional. Okay, because he had gotten mesothelioma, and so they were asking about his family history. And so, okay, well, but about your mother? Well, she died young. I think the flu epidemic of 1918. That's the story. Whether it's true or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then he said, "Well, what about your father? How did he die?" And he goes, "Lead poisoning." So, so the woman says, "Lead poisoning? Was he a painter or something?" No, no, he got shot to death by. He was shot, and I'm sitting there going, he's telling me the story, and I'm laughing. Actually, I'm listening to the
Yeah.
story, and I'm laughing. I said, "God, I said to myself, that's so pop. That's
Mhm.
so who he is."
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course the story is there are two stories about why uh, his father got shot. One of them I think is romantic, and the other one is just unfortunate. One story was that the one that I liked was that he was shot by a jealous husband,
Mhm.
which if I'm lucky and I make it to 92, I'll be shot by some jealous husband at 92 because what can I tell you? If I keep my
Because you're
hair, maybe
you. Yeah. Because
if
you're
I
you.
if I keep my hair, it might happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So most of the people on my age now are bald, but especially in my family. Right? But
Yeah.
anyway, and then the other one was that his father was a landlord, and one of his irate tenants shot him. But I
I
like
like
the
the husband one. Yeah. It's more
yeah,
controversial, more spicy.
spicy, yeah. But I also like romantic in a certain kind of way.
Of
But
course,
anyways,
you're a
but
romantic at heart.
yeah. But I mean, my father was the kind of guy where um, he lived for me and he lived for my sister. And he
Hmm.
came home on the weekends, and all he wanted to do was spend time with us.
Yeah.
And like like when we were really young, we were always around. He was one of those fathers who would do stuff even though I knew he didn't really care to do it.
Yeah.
Like he would take me fishing,
Yeah.
okay? And he wasn't a fisherman, but
Hmm.
he knew I liked it, so he would take me snapper fishing when the time was
Hmm.
right, and
So
we
did he
spent
teach
time.
you how to fish, or you?
Well, yeah, not really. I had other
Okay.
people who were really, really fishermen, but he would take me,
Yeah.
uh, to whatever lake we were living near Prospect Park in Brooklyn. To take me there. I used to catch what they call calico bass there and
Yeah. Yeah.
catfish
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and then of course I remember distinctly I was really young. I must have been in second or third grade, and I
Yeah.
remember walking with him from the train, and he took me to Coney Island, just me. Okay,
Hmm.
and like a lot of kids, a lot of boys,
Yeah.
spending time alone with their fathers is a big thing. It's a
Mm.
big thing. I just said, "Oh my God, I'm with my father. I'm, just me, just him, and
Yeah.
mom's not around, and his brothers aren't around." It was something special. It was always
Hmm.
special to be
Hmm.
alone with him. You know.
Yeah.
And then when I grew up, I'll tell you a story that if I can get through some of this without getting weepy, because
I know. I know. I was thinking that today. I'm
I,
like, if we're gonna talk about fathers, I might start crying. I got my tissues in case.
Well, I'll tell you now. Like I tell you about, my father took me fishing, and he really didn't care about fishing.
Hmm.
When he was much older,
Yeah.
a couple of years before he died, I had my boat, and I was, charter boat fishing and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I took him one day to Mauritius Inlet. I knew the fishing. It was a beautiful, beautiful day on the ocean. It was glassy. It was calm. Inlet was safe. And I go out, and I go, "Okay, Pop, we'll see what's here. It's either striped bass or bluefish."
Yeah.
Well, go out the inlet, and I hit on the west bar. I hit a school of bluefish. Okay, and I said, "Okay, here, take this rod. Just cast to them. They'll grab it right away."
Yeah.
Well, he was catching fish after fish after fish,
Hmm.
and I'm watching him,
Yeah.
and he's got a smile on his face and a song in his
Oh.
heart, and he's having the best day. It was a beautiful sunny day, and
Yeah.
he catch the fish, and I don't hook him, and he casts again to catch another fish.
Yeah.
And I just said, this is, I'm paying back. it gave him such joy, and it gave me
Hmm.
such joy to see
Yeah.
him,
It's just,
you
so the
know.
look on his face was probably priceless that you
Ah,
saw,
it was
right?
great. Yeah, it was great.
Hmm.
So, but I mean, it was something like that. And then the other part of this is that when my mother was tough
Yeah.
and too tough,
Yeah.
and since he was an orphan, he didn't know how mothers were supposed to do their job really. Okay, 'cause
Yeah. Yeah.
he lived with his brothers. They had an aunt, and the
Hmm.
relationships that when he was growing up were very, very. I'm going to call them indifferent, and
He never really challenged um your mom.
yeah, he was afraid of her.
Mm, okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, really,
Yeah.
because yeah, I mean, I get it too. Like my mother was tough, and he felt too tough. One of the things I remember that he told me we had such great conversations when we were adults, and
Hmm.
this is another rare thing where men sometimes don't feel secure about uh, showing their feelings about things.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, I don't know how we got into the conversation. I guess my mother was at one of her worst moments as she was unraveling emotionally and
Yeah.
mentally.
Yeah.
And he said, he said, I remember when you kids were younger. He said, I used to go to another room and I start to cry. I said, what? He
Really?
said, yeah, yeah. He said, I felt that she was being so mean to you and so cruel to you.
Oh,
And,
really?
and I said, so well, what about? He said, well, he said one of the agreements we made when we first, when you were first born, was that well, since I didn't have parents, that I was going to have to allow her or trust her because
Wow.
she had parents and she would probably know more than I would.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
based upon his insecurity of being a decent parent,
Hmm.
he let her have a little too much leeway,
Mm.
and was insecure about saying, well, you know what, maybe this is what
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
should be doing,
He
you
didn't
know?
have the guidance, he didn't have the knowledge, he didn't have any examples in his life. And that's a huge thing that I'm realizing. Like, if you don't have that example in your life, you really can't, you don't have like the evidence to like go forward to be like, oh, well, this is how I experience it. And this is how I'm going to treat my kids. Or this is kind of husband that I want to meet because my father was like this. Right.
Yeah, I mean, look, remember too, I mean, he lost his mother first, and then he lost his
Yeah.
father,
Yeah.
to lead poisoning.
Lead poisoning. I know. I love that.
I know. And so as a consequence, he just really didn't feel he had the role models he
He didn't
needed.
have the confidence. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely not. But again, I told him when he said that to me about his crying and so I said, "Pop, you were a natural. Mom was too tough.
Yeah.
She was all about control.
Yeah.
She was more like her father, even though she loathed her father. She,
Unfortunately, a lot of people do that, right? You
yeah,
unfortunately follow unconsciously the negative
yes,
things, or you choose
yes.
unconsciously someone who's like the person you don't like, your father or mother.
Here's a bit of psychology that I read about many, many times,
Hmm.
talking just about just that.
Yeah.
For example, let's say a girl has an alcoholic father,
Yeah.
okay, and she grows up and she learned how to deal with that alcoholic father.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She was able to make whatever
Hmm.
peace or whatever a movement she could dealing with
Yeah.
that alcoholic father. So here's what happens: like psychiatrists will say, and because you mentioned the word unconsciously,
Yeah.
that over a period of time,
Hmm.
when she gets married, even if the guy she marries is not an alcoholic,
Yeah.
she'll make him become an alcoholic. Why?
Because
Because
it's familiar and it's
thank you.
unconscious and you will attract it. I've been studying, I mean, all of this is fascinating to me, so I've been studying a lot of it on the side and
Right.
listening to all kinds of psychologies and socialism and philosophy. So like all of it makes sense to me because you unconsciously just attract that because it's familiar also to your nervous system too. Like, you don't realize that you're in fight or flight constantly, and you just naturally pick a man that is similar to the chaos that you actually had as a kid, and it's familiar.
And this is why they pay you the big money, honey. Okay, be able to perceive that. I mean, it's true. I mean, I thought it was startling to me that they said, well, that it will even happen with a guy who's not a drinker. Okay,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
eventually, over a period of time, it's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so becomes so as toxic as the relationship might be,
Yeah.
it's something like you said, it's something that she understands.
Yeah. And the ironic thing is that you actually don't feel comfortable in something that is actually safe. So say you grew up with like an abusive father, and really you should be picking the opposite, right? Someone who's safe
Right.
and whatever,
That's right.
and
That's
who's
right.
nice and sweet and loving to you. But if you never got that as a kid, that is something actually that you're not attracted to and you're not familiar with, that you're just
Right.
like, oh, I don't like that. I don't, you're
Yeah.
too nice, you know?
And I know too many stories. I've seen it in my own sphere
Yeah,
of life where men who abandon their children
yeah,
when all of a sudden the men or women get married, especially the women get married, and they'll marry somebody, especially second and third marriages. They'll marry somebody who's already abandoned children. In other words, there's something. I'm not even sure I get all that, but the
yeah,
point of it all is that the familiarity with
yeah,
certain kinds of approaches to life and
yeah,
approaches to marriage kind of are what people will do, you know.
yeah,
Like so I could argue that like they'll say, well, men marry their mothers and um, men marry their mothers and women marry their fathers. Okay,
yeah.
and that's part of
That
that
Freud is like Freud, right?
yeah, absolutely, yes, absolutely. So, for example, how is my wife like my mother? Okay.
Yeah. Or
Oh,
your
oh,
first wife or your second wife. Like, do you think either of
so
them are
who's
like your
yeah,
mother?
who's that?
Do you think
No,
either your first or second?
no, my that first marriage didn't last long enough. But
Mm,
my in my present marriage, now that we're both older,
hmm.
okay, and so she goes, well, okay, there are certain things about her. I said, well, that's just that sounds like my mother. Okay,
Mm,
that's what my mother would do. Okay, and trying
yeah.
to like saying, okay, you're having too many snacks. Okay, so stop
Really?
it. Oh yeah, yeah,
Oh.
and she'll make an issue of it. And I go, "Oh, I know you're right, but you don't have to yell at me like my mother yelled at me. In other
Yeah,
words,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know,
You're like,
so
I'm a grown adult. I'm 76. I can eat whatever
exactly.
amount of cookies I want.
And it's fun. Now talk about that. That brings up my father again. I remember my father was in his 70s,
Hmm.
and I must have been, I don't know, what was I, 40? I don't, whatever my age was, what the difference was. And I remember saying to him, he was worried about his weight, he was worried about his health, and you know. And I said, no, I go, you know what, Pop? I said, if I ever live to your advanced age,
Yeah.
I'm gonna eat any fucking thing and drink any fucking thing
Exactly.
you want.
Exactly.
Okay?
It's like, I
So,
have one life to live and I want to eat whatever the hell I want to eat.
but now, of course, now you have to understand now. I said that, and
Yeah.
he had to be 72 or 3. I'm now past that age. Okay.
Yeah. And then
And
you're
here's
saying it to you.
yeah, but yeah, but here's what I realized. So
Yeah.
now I'm thinking, well, now I know why he was concerned because all of a sudden between your doctors and everything else, you go, well, wait a second.
Mhm.
I probably shouldn't eat this. I
Yeah.
probably shouldn't eat. I have to worry about my cholesterol. I have to
Yeah.
worry about my blood pressure. So I have to ease up on the salt, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's so funny how your age and your perception of let's say your parents and what they're going through,
Yeah.
when you when you finally get to that point, you say,
Yeah.
"Oh, now I get it. Now I
Now you
understand it."
get it. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I have a
Now,
couple of people who want to say hi to you. Richard Schaefer says hi, and Christian
hey,
Cespedes says hi.
my goodness. Oh, I haven't heard from these guys in a long time. Hi,
I
hi back.
know, right?
Yeah, that's
So,
great.
and
But what I wanted to say to you now is that my thing was about teaching. I started to realize I always knew I was kind of lucky with having the father I had,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
started to really, really be grateful when realized I had so many
Hmm.
students of mine, male
Who
students.
started opening up to you?
Well, that, but I mean, later on, I mean, in other words, but I started to realize when I started talking about my father and the advice he gave me and stuff,
Hmm. Hmm.
these young men would almost, you could see them leaning forward in their
Hmm.
desks and
Hmm.
their ears really perked up to say,
Yeah,
wait
they're
a
like,
second.
what? What is this? That we don't know what this is.
Yeah, yeah. Like, what do you mean? Your father gave you advice? You had a father? You
He
gave
came
gave you
home and gave you candy. What?
yeah,
Like that? I'm
yeah, really?
honestly, like that's just so sweet to me. Like I don't know what that means to me because my
It means
dad was a dictator. Like there was
yeah,
none of that. There was no love. There was no like
yeah. That's
sweetness.
sad.
There was
See,
no
that's sad.
kindness.
But that's another thing. See, my father was that way because again, he had, I guess, as an orphan, he had people around him who weren't really harassing him really.
Mhm.
Um, and he had older brothers, so
Yeah.
they were more important to him than to say any of the adults that he was around, his aunts and uncles with whom he was living.
Yeah.
And but the sweetness about I'll tell you another story about why my father was so special.
Mhm.
Uh, w- we had a cousin, a woman, and she used to come out to our house in the summers, and we'd go down. And then when I was a teenager, she'd come down with me and my sister. We go to the beach, and she'd watch me surf and blah blah blah. So winds up anyway that my father died. She was living, I think, in Connecticut or Massachusetts.
Mhm.
I think Connecticut. Anyway, she went out of her way to come to the wake. Okay, I guess she took a train or something, ferry,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Comes to the wake, stays an hour to pay her respects,
Yeah.
and then leaves.
Yeah.
Goes back.
Mhm.
And my sister talked to her, and she said to our cousin, she said, "Well, my, what? Gee, that was really, really great. That was really nice of you to do that, but you could have stayed longer. You could have stayed overnight." She said, "Look," she goes, "your father, now, not unlike you, Linda, her father was problematic, okay?" And she said, "He was like a second father to me, and
Aw.
I loved him to death."
Yeah.
And see,
Yeah.
so I'm getting emotional now, but
Yeah.
I loved him to death, and
Mhm.
I just wanted to let you guys know how much, and I just needed to, at some level, know that, or maybe he knew that I was there. I said, "That's a beautiful thing," but he drew that kind of emotion from people,
Mhm.
and he was quiet about it. He was not,
Mhm.
uh, he was just not like, how do I say? He was affectionate, but he wasn't necessarily, you know, all over you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He probably had like a warm energy to him that people
Yeah.
just naturally, feel
But
it when you enter a room probably in his presence.
yeah, and I think though what happened was when I was telling those things in classes over the years about stuff my father told me, like I think I
Yeah.
told you,
Yeah.
he said like I learned tolerance from him.
Mhm.
He said, "Hey pal, live and let live."
Yeah.
People's language, color, religion means nothing. It's,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone, and
Yeah.
you'll probably get along with each other because you're not judgmental. Okay,
Yeah.
they're gonna,
Even though you
and
have your clear opinions about things.
who, me?
You.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
listen.
Yeah.
I told you, hey, opinions are like, I'm gonna clean this up. Opinions are like noses. Everybody has one, and
You
I
mean
am loaded.
assholes?
See, here I used the F word before. I didn't mean to, but I'm trying to keep this clean.
I know it's okay. You don't have to keep it clean.
So, but what I was starting to realize that young men in my classes were really interested in what I had to say about
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
experiences with my father. And then the part that really shocked me is that many of them were starting to look to me as being a role model, or I don't know, not even a substitute father, maybe that, but also I guess the older I got, I became a substitute father. But
Yeah.
when I was younger, maybe like a substitute older brother, because they were looking for role models
Yeah.
and male role models.
Hmm.
Here's one of my favorite stories about a young man who had no father.
Yeah.
Okay, one of our most brilliant students at Central Bicep
Mhm.
winds up getting a free shot at Harvard. Okay, Harvard now.
Really
Yes,
awesome.
probably somebody knows who it is. I'm not mentioning names, but anyway, but a brilliant
I,
and a very
I'm sure
quiet.
we always figure it out later.
I'm sure, but I would shout a name to the skies, but I don't. He was a kind of shy guy. No, he's probably not anymore, but he was a brilliant math and science student.
Did he go?
Uh, huh?
Did he
Well,
go?
here's the story. Yes, but here's the story. Uh, I said to him once,
Hmm.
we had conversations, and I said, gee, uh, you had no father, and you had a mother who barely spoke English, and a
Yeah.
sister who's problematic, right?
Yeah.
I said, but so just out of curiosity, because I was interested in this as a teacher, I
Yeah.
said, who was your role model?
Yeah.
Who was your male role model? An uncle or,
Yeah.
somebody else? He said, no. He said, I thought this was absolutely amazing because I would watch movies and TV and whatever, and I tried to just emulate the best male role models that I perceived as being good role
Oh.
models.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he was getting his
Uh-huh.
this input from
Yeah.
let's say
Me.
heroes and actors on TV or in
Yeah.
movies. And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's all right. As long as they weren't gun-toting maniacs, that would be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he had to find his male role models where he could.
Wow.
And he went on to be very successful.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time I got a little concerned, he came back to visit during one of the class breaks. And, we used to talk a lot of philosophy in my
Yeah.
classes and literature and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
he said to me, "Well, I think I'm going to want to change my major." I guess it was something, high end, and math, science. I think he went off to become a really a tech or science guy. I know he made a. I think he worked for some computer company
Yeah.
ultimately and
Yeah.
made money. But he said to me, I'm thinking maybe I'm going to change my major to philosophy.
Oh.
I went I went ballistic. I went crazy. I remember I took him in a nice way. I took him by the lapels,
Yeah.
pushed him up against the wall in the hallway, and are you freaking nuts?
Yeah.
Well, but philosophy, this is real. I said, I said, if I had your talents
Yeah.
in math and science, and there's no way. I said, look, you're going to wind up being on some park bench feeding the pigeons peanuts, okay? As a philosopher, you can only teach at a university and make
Yeah.
relatively zero money, and
Yeah.
you have and the other thing, and this is really important,
Or do podcasts.
yeah, right, exactly. And the other thing was that with him in particular, I never forgot. Because his mother was like working in a factory and his sister was unemployed and stuff, he
Yeah.
felt the need, which was to his credit. I mean, it showed great sensitivity and great love for his mother and sister. He said, "Well, his mother didn't want him to go to college." And I said, that was another tough one because this
Yeah.
is the thing where, I'm not a big fan of giving people advice, really. In other words, I'll give you options. I said, well,
Yeah.
what about this? I'll
Yeah.
give you five options and you
Yeah.
pick the option that you. But this time I wasn't going to let him off the hook. I went, excuse me,
This is the
what is
Harvard guy where his mother told him he didn't want him to go to
yeah, because
college.
I said, what does your mother know from Harvard? She knows nothing about Harvard.
Yeah.
She doesn't. All is worried about putting food on the table, a roof over your heads, and which is obviously a great concern. There's no
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
You couldn't fault her for that.
Yeah.
But she didn't understand what it would mean for not only his future, but for her future
It's
and their future.
Harvard.
So here's what I told him. I said, look, I said, I got to be honest with you. I'm
Yeah.
going to preach selfishness to you. You need to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
selfish. You
Yeah.
need to say, Ma, I love you. I
Hmm.
love my sister, but I got to go to this high-end school.
Yeah.
I'll probably do really, really well. And when
Yeah.
I finish, I can get a job. And all of a sudden, I'll be able to help you and my
Hmm.
sister live a better life financially. And that's
Hmm.
exactly what he did.
Yeah.
But,
That's the
but
same thing. That's the same thing you did for me.
well, this is the thing. And the thing is that sometimes you don't have uh, strong enough role models to say, sometimes you do have to be selfish for
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
benefit of others, not
Yeah.
only yourself, but for the benefit of others.
Yeah.
And I think that this is where young men in my classes started realize that yeah, they had a certain responsibility, but also if they weren't getting it from the men in their lives,
Hmm.
Now, um, I think like with Gary when he was doing his podcast that he kind of
Yeah.
indicated he had coaches and stuff and
Hmm.
that's great. In other words, if the young men in your classes who are fatherless
Yeah.
and they're fatherless for a lot of different reasons, sometimes they're just which I find fascinating and horrible. Their fathers just abandon them for some
Yeah.
reason. They're
Yeah.
alive,
And
but
I
they have
know, I
nothing to
know
do with it.
many friends of mine where the fathers either abandoned him or one of them, his father shot somebody and he went to jail at 3 years old and he saw this at 3.
Oh God. Oh yeah.
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 Yeah. He
Yeah.
saw his father shoot somebody who was attacking his mother and he went to jail. At three
Yeah.
years old, he saw this. And afterwards, I think his father took him to go get ice cream.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Insane. And then like
yeah.
what do you do after that?
Yeah.
Like where do you find your role models? And if you're living in a bad environment, unfortunately your role models are the drug dealers, the
Yeah.
guys on the street who are just like, either abusing women or just like hustlers.
Yeah.
And the goal is to get as many women as possible and you end up falling into that trap.
Yeah, and I just think that, and again, I'm not slamming mothers at all. I mean, I think that
Yeah.
my look,
Mhm.
my mother, I told you, was a terrific mother until she started to unravel.
Yeah.
And single mothers, I mean, they have a tough job. There's no
Yeah.
doubt, because now they're trying to be dad and mom, and
Yeah.
that's
And you can't do
almost
that. It's
impossible. Yeah,
hard.
it's
It's
tough.
super
It's
hard.
tough.
You can't be a man's role model to your
But
kids because that's
also,
a
you see,
whole nother
but
thing.
here's the other issue about male role models. My, I'm always concerned when m young men think that you have to be a macho man, you have to be tough, and you have to
Yeah.
be hard, and you have to
Yeah.
be, you know, strong, silent type.
Yeah.
My father was not that way. He was a man. He was masculine,
Hmm.
but he was a gentle soul. He
Yeah. And
was
he did he share his feelings with you when you were a kid
a,
or later on more?
much later on. We had, and that's another story. See, we had conversations. When we were both, I was a mature man. I was, I don't know, 40s, 50s,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And we said all the things to each other
Hmm.
that if you read about in books that, well, this is the way it really should be, about how you
Yeah.
men and fathers and sons should talk to each other.
Yeah.
And we did that. We
Hmm.
did that. Even before he got sick. This was
Yeah.
before he I remember telling him, I forget what brought it on. He telling me how proud he was of me, and this, that,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I told him, Pop, you were just, like I said, I told him to his face, you
Yeah.
were a natural parent, a natural
And that
father.
must have lit up his heart amazingly that you told him that.
I, I think so. I'd like to think so. You know what I mean?
I
Because I
think
think that,
totally.
yeah, I kind of feel that um, that doesn't happen often enough. Sometimes people say, well, I didn't tell my father what I wanted to tell him before he
Yeah.
died.
Yeah. And then you have regrets.
Well, yeah, vice versa, and we didn't
Mhm.
have those regrets. We knew exactly how we felt about each other.
Yeah.
My, here's a story too.
Yeah.
My sister still laughs when I remind her, to show you how my father had this incredible sense of humor.
Yeah. Yeah. The
He
dry
is,
humor.
yeah. Oh, please. And the humor was contingent on the following substance.
Hmm.
My mother, as she got worse and worse as time went on, it got more
Hmm.
tyrannical, more difficult.
More
Just
dictatorship.
Yeah, oh, well, really. But again, to be fair, she was starting already to go into dementia. Okay, so to be
Oh, okay.
fair to her,
Okay.
but it was like really uncontrollable.
Yeah.
So he's on his deathbed. He's literally a half an hour away.
Really?
Yeah, I'm sitting by his side. Okay,
Yeah.
and I said, Pop, hey man, this is just not right. You're leaving me half an orphan. In other
Yeah.
words, I'm losing you.
Yeah.
All I have is left is my mom. And I said, and she's just getting more difficult and worse and worse. And he looks at me with this little bit of a smile on his face, and he goes, because I said, you're leaving me with, to
Half an
take care of me.
orphan. Yeah.
He goes to me, she's all yours. I thought that was I said, even on his deathbed, he's making
Oh
me
my
laugh.
God. A half an hour before he's about to pass, he's like,
Yeah,
see you
exactly.
later.
Yeah,
It's all yours.
she's all yours, pal.
Oh my God.
And I told it to my sister because my sister was living, she wasn't around,
Yeah.
and she laughed her butt off because she goes, "That's so him. That's so
Yeah.
pop."
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that humor is something else that young men need. They need to have
You need
fathers who
that.
have
That's a
fun. Yeah.
huge thing that we didn't laugh in my house. Like, I don't know any of that. I don't think I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
got comfortable to be myself and laugh till
Well,
much later in my life.
yeah.
Hmm.
But I think that it is sad. I mean, it's and this is why I used to always argue when used to do Anna Karenina with my honor students.
Hmm.
And the first line of his novel is that happy families are all the same, but
Hmm.
unhappy families are unhappy in their own way.
Hmm.
And I always took issue with the fact that he really seemed to believe that there were happy families,
Hmm. Yeah.
And we right now it is very common in our culture to talk about dysfunctional families,
Yeah.
and and there are a lot of reasons for the dysfunction, But uh, I mean, look, you have people have to work hard. With my family,
Yeah.
both parents worked.
Yeah.
Uh, we probably could have lived just on his salary alone. But
Oh, okay.
again, my mother's to show you how trauma worked out in our family
Yeah.
because she couldn't go to get to do the free shot to Hunter College. All she needed was subway fare to get there, but
Yeah.
she couldn't do it because she had to take care of her mother and siblings, right?
Yeah.
She always had that anger and resentment about not being able to go to college. So the most
Yeah.
important thing for her was that uh, my sister, and I, we had to go to college. We should go to
Yeah.
college.
Because
So
she
her
didn't
family,
she didn't do it, so she's making sure that
yeah,
you do it. It's kind of living out her dream, kind of a little bit.
well, that's it. That's another thing about living
I know.
vicariously
I've
through
learned a lot
children.
of things through the years, Mr. Schiavo.
I know. I know you have. I've been
I
talking to you. I
have. This
know
is
you
why we can have these like lovely conversations,
have.
right?
Yeah. But I have to tell you about my father's story about living vicariously through me. That's a
Yeah.
funny one too.
Yeah.
But my mother was doing that, and of course, all of her income, she
Hmm.
cashed the checks, put them into the bank in a savings account.
Yeah.
So when I went to college, and my
Yeah.
sister went to college, I graduated from, well, actually, I graduated from St. John's, and I think later on at a school in Pennsylvania for a while, but she ended up in St.
They
John's.
paid for your college?
Totally paid. Everything was paid.
Hmm.
Okay, but and there was they paid for the tuition.
Hmm.
And the deal was, okay, we'll pay for your undergraduate school. Then if you want to get, a master's or a PhD, you're on
Yeah.
your own.
Yeah.
It's fine. So to give her credit, she worked like a dog and put that money in the bank. And if I wanted a new pair of sneakers or a toy growing up, forget that. The answer was always no, because that
Really?
money was oh yeah,
Oh,
that
wow.
money was college. I remember I wanted, but when I graduated from where the hell was I graduating from? I wanted this big, gigantic, like coffee table book about horses. At the
Yeah.
time, it was
Yeah.
it was $35, which was expensive for a book,
Yeah.
and they absolutely said no,
No.
no, no way.
No.
Okay. Now I must have been in high school, I guess. But going back to my father living vicariously, he was a kick. He says to me, both times I got married, but certainly the second time, to my present
Both
wife.
time. Yeah, like both time he had to give me some advice.
But
Yeah.
here's what he said to me.
Hmm.
I kind of say, okay, I'm really serious about this woman. I'm going to get married. He goes,
Yeah.
you're going to get married? And of course, the second time he goes, you're going to get married again? Right? So what
You
are
didn't
you?
learn the first time?
That's right, exactly right. What didn't you learn the first time? He said, "Look at you. You got
Yeah.
a back in the condo. You got a horse. You got this pickup truck camper. You've been up and down the north and south and across the country." He goes, "You travel all over the place." He goes, and then of course the part that bothers me the most. Okay, the horse I don't really get, and he said, but I go see you at the beach, and I see you with these hot steaming women. Okay, he goes. I've been living vicariously through you. Every time I see you with a new girlfriend
Oh my
and they look
God.
great, he goes, I'm thinking, man, what did I do wrong? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he said, so now you're going to kill me. You're going to kill my whole fantasy life is going down the tubes if you get
Oh
married.
my God. That's hysterical.
I know. I just laugh.
Wait, was this before? Oh no, this is actually before. Never mind. I was thinking of another story you told me
Oh,
about when he visited you. I think you had a cabin, right?
oh
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. So this is definitely before because that was when you were single. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But this was afterwards. I know the story you're talking about. With the girl
Yeah,
finally
yeah.
climbed through the window. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Because he's like, this is amazing, probably. I just keep living like this.
Well, I think that the relationship, this is a perfect, in fact, I wasn't, when that was happening, for the people who are watching this, my father had worked at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. They shut it down, right?
Mhm,
And so he
mhm.
said, okay.
Wait, what was his job?
Well, at that point, he was still working on the ships. I guess his title was pipe fitter, okay?
Oh,
And, but they, but
oh my
they,
God,
but,
that's actually ironic. I'm doing two pieces of art for pipe fitters.
oh, really?
Yeah,
Well, but see, this was not really like plumbing. This was,
yeah.
he
I,
used to work on these big aircraft
mhm,
carriers, and they
mhm,
used to have these catapults, and the catapults had the jet planes. They put them on, and the
mhm.
catapult would shoot them up to speed. Okay, and they have their engines on, and as soon as the catapult released them, they powered up the plane and they shot off the aircraft carrier. So that was kind of heavy duty, right?
Yeah.
That eventually he wound up going to a white collar job working for the Defense Department.
Oh,
But
wow.
but
But he's super intelligent.
well, my father was no dope, but
Yeah.
he had gone to college for 2 years, and then because of his schedule and stuff, he just say, okay, he was going to night school. He said, I just can't keep doing this. I'm getting up at 4 in the morning to go to my job, and then I'm going to
Yeah.
school at night till whenever. And he finally said, okay, 2 years, that's enough, And so he never finished. Okay, but he made sure that I finished. Okay,
Yeah.
so but the story that we were talking about to show you how my father was such a neat guy because
Yeah.
so they went up to Pennsylvania, and then of course he needed to come back to New York and had to find a place to live for my sister and for my mother. So I've been living in my little bachelor uh, bungalow. It was in Dix Hills. It was behind a house and it was on a wooded property. It was very
Oh, it's
secluded.
kind of like a little like tiny home Airbnb or something.
Yeah, really, exactly. And so
Hmm.
anyway, so he's staying with me for a few weeks.
Hmm.
So one night it's got to be 12:30. Okay,
Hmm.
I took a shower. I was taking a shower because I had to get up early the next morning. I had a test to take and some kind of class, philosophy or theology,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And he says to me as I'm kind of drawing off, and he goes, "I think I hear I hear some kind of scratching at the kitchen window.
Like,
Like
oh, it's just a squirrel.
yeah, no." I said, "Well, it's probably I know there's a shrub there. Maybe it's just it's just it's rubbing against the the glass in the wind." He goes, "Well, it's not
Yeah.
that windy."
Yeah.
So I'm not thinking about it too much about it, so I'm putting on my whatever's. And he said, he said, "No, pal." He said, "I think I see a head."
I
So
see a head. Yeah.
I throw on a pair of pants and stuff, and I go out and I see this girl.
Yeah.
I see she's now, the whole deal was I the kitchen window was above the sink and it was high up.
Hmm.
And the rule was the place would always be locked up, but the kitchen window was always left unlocked. And sometimes young women would know that, if they saw that there was nothing on my doorknob indicating I was busy,
Yeah, like no handkerchief or something.
yeah, they'd hide, put a tie on there or a shirt or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
They if they wanted to come in, they could come in
Yeah.
through the window.
Yeah.
So it's 12:30, 12:30, you know, and all of a sudden, this girl, she opens up the window that like swung out, right?
Yeah.
And, and she looks up, and
Hmm.
first she sees my father sitting on the couch,
Yeah.
and then she sees me, and I said, "Oh, Sandy." Let me introduce you to my father.
Oh
And
my
by the way, you
God.
can come around through the front door now.
Oh my God. That is so
So
funny.
it was funny. So she was so embarrassed. I was so bad. She was so embarrassed, and she said, so she comes in and she's doing the humming thing like so like
Like, what do I do? I
She says,
should just
well,
leave.
some of the gang we're gonna going to the local pub, whatever. And I thought maybe you'd want to come
And
and
your
see.
dad's probably like, yeah, I know what this is.
Of course, of course. So, but that wasn't the class. His line was classy when she left. So I said, well, I can't do. I got a test. I said, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So okay, so she leaves. So she's gone, and he says to me, "Hey, pal." I said, "What?" He said, "Does this happen here often like that?" I said, "Often enough." So
Yeah.
he goes, "Does she have any girlfriends?" And I'm going, "Oh God, oh
Yeah,
God."
yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
my
he was
God.
so funny.
That is
But I mean, he
awesome.
he he was that kind of a guy. He
At
wasn't,
least you at least you let him live vicariously through you, because if you were not the way you were, he'd be worried about you, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think that stories like that, when if I told them to my males, remember the class was co-ed classes, but
yeah.
I think some of the girls, I'm not unlike yourself, they would say, well, gee, wait a second, my father, is not quite like that.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just think, frankly, that I I I always became well aware of the fact that young men were seeking some that fatherly
Yeah.
role model, and that
Yeah. And
sometimes
that
I was
relationship, yeah, that relationship and like bond that you had with him like is completely foreign to many of us, you know?
yeah, and by the way, my mother wasn't happy about
Really?
it.
She didn't like that relationship?
No, she thought that he was as a father, she like for example, she didn't like the fact that he called me pal,
Oh, because it's making it more like we're
a friend.
equal. We're
Yeah,
yeah, we're equal friends. Yeah.
and she said, "No, you're supposed to be his father,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that means you should be judgmental and you should be
Controlling.
punishing."
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was not his natural mode, you see, to be
No,
controlled.
no.
Not his natural
Mm-mm,
mode. And
mm-mm.
I think that's something else that I learned. I learned that with the students, that
Yeah.
I used to complain if students were being a little bit difficult,
Yeah.
and I would say, "Hey, look, don't make me be teacher.
Yeah.
Don't make me. Yes, I have the authority. I'm going to send you to
But you don't want to be like that. No.
exactly. In other words, I don't want to have to be judgmental. I don't want to have to be in a position where I
Have to
have to punish.
reprimand you for something that you're
Yeah,
doing.
or I have to punish you. I've got to
Yeah.
send you to the office or send you to detention. I just didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
It was foreign to me because I guess because of him, I didn't feel it was necessary to
Hmm.
deal with young people that way, male or female.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
And my basic tool was always humor.
Which
See,
is amazing. I mean, that's what makes a lot of like, I'm watching a lot of videos and speakers, and humor really just, cuts it really down where it actually awakes people quickly too. Like when you, especially like you say, when you're in classroom, a lot of the kids start drifting off, right? And they start like,
sure.
oh, I'm getting tired. I'm starting to fall asleep. I had a hard time at home. But once you click that humor, they start coming back to present body, and then they listen to you.
Yeah, I had a student teacher who was a woman who had been a CI student, and she
Hmm.
was 41 or 2.
Yeah.
Came to it late, okay?
Hmm.
And she was one of my student teachers, and
Yeah.
she noticed that about my classes, that if all of a sudden I was doing something really serious in terms of literary interpretation or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the students might start to be drifting off a little bit,
Yeah.
she'd say she'd notice I would say something funny or do
Mm.
something funny,
Yeah.
and she said afterwards, she would say to me, you always seem to have this ability or this sense that okay, things are not going the way you'd like them to go, and you make them
Mhm.
laugh.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
said, yeah, I said, because one of the things you must do when you're dealing with groups
Yeah.
is you have to actually look at your audience and
Mm.
see what the looks on their faces are. That's how
Yeah.
you tell whether a kid is happy or sad, whether
Yeah.
there's probably a problem with home or
Yeah.
with a girlfriend or boyfriend. Because again, this goes back to what I said many times with you, is that you have to do the social work, and sometimes it's the personal work in order to get the academic work done. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and I learned that from my father. My father used to make people
Mm.
laugh, and he used just a nice guy to be around.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what else I could say about this, except that I really felt as an instructor the importance of telling certain stories that might be informative or instructive
Yeah.
to young people in the room, especially the young men, because I
Mhm.
was so, I guess I felt so um, un, I don't know what word to use. Not unhappy. So I guess just concerned that they didn't have the kind of fathering experience
Like you
that I
had.
had,
Hmm.
and that experience made me very secure, okay,
Yeah.
as a person, and also said to me, "This is a way, as a man, I can deal
Hmm.
with other men and women, and especially with students." Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I learned from him, I think, how to be a better teacher and a better.
And empathetic.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's it. That's the word. That's the word. Again, I
Empathetic.
told you I was a superficial, hedonistic, young man when I first started teaching. I
Yes.
I
Yes.
say it almost proudly, and I shouldn't be proud of it, but
No, but I mean, that's amazing that you can come and tell you, like, listen, I was a surfer. I want to do this. And honestly, that's actually a really cool, fun part to do. When I tell people, I'm like, oh, I'm speaking to my, one of my mentors, my English teacher, and get this, he used to be a surfer. And they're like, oh, wow, that's cool. Like I told this to Jacob. And
oh,
Jacob,
really?
yeah, Jacob really liked it. He's like, "Oh, he was a surfer. That is really cool, because now you have the cool factor, and you're a smart guy, and now hopefully, the kids and people will eventually
Yeah,
love listening to these."
yeah, and I think but that's another thing too. My father had stories to tell me. Okay,
Mm,
I
mhm.
can't. I could spend weeks telling you some of his
Yeah,
stories.
yeah. No,
Because
see,
he
I never got stories.
Yeah, and I remember he told me stories about he used to live on a farm
Yeah,
with
yeah.
his aunt and uncle, and they had all kinds of animals,
Yeah.
he used to have to go chase the chickens so they could,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
then also they had a parrot, and the parrot sounded like his aunt.
Hmm. That's
So one
funny.
mo-
Like I never got stories, so maybe that's why I'm fascinated by people and their
yeah.
stories, you know?
One of my favorite stories was they used to have on, I guess on Sundays, they used to have buns. They used to go to the bakery and get buns.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
And he could walk there from the farm, right?
Yeah.
And he said one morning, about 5:30 in the morning, he hears you know, he hears something, get the buns, and it's
It was
and
the
so what?
bird.
Yeah, it's a bird. So it was the bird, the
Yeah.
parrot. So he
Yeah.
wakes up, and it was his turn to get the buns, right? So
Oh my
he knows where
God.
he knew where the money was. So he
Mhm.
gets up, and he's in the dark, and he's heading off to the bakery. He comes back and finds out that it wasn't his aunt talking, it was the parrot talking.
Oh my
And,
God. That
and
is
apparently either
hysterical.
they were going to get the buns later or something. But it was so funny because he was telling me the story, and I was just fascinated that he had a parrot when he was
Yeah.
young. He
Yeah.
was living in the house with a parrot. They
Yeah.
also had a monkey. They had a monkey.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
Yeah. So I mean, he
Wow.
would tell me all these stories of his childhood, even as an orphan, and
Hmm.
I was just transfixed by those
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. So he lived with his what? His aunt or uncle or
Yeah, yeah, and
grandparents?
yeah, his aunt and uncle, yeah.
So they raised him.
Well, and again with his other siblings, it was a farm, and so
Yeah.
But I mean, it was, remember in those days, even then they got paid to do that.
Yeah.
So they were getting money for it.
Yeah.
Not to take away what they did, it's just the fact that it was not a normal parent-child relationship, really.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
But like I said, I hope that the young men in my classes got something from me about
They
fatherhood.
totally did. And I have a
Mhm.
question from Christian. He says, how was your guidance for the youth evolved from when you started teaching to 1991 to today?
Well, he
How
was
did
in
your
the
guidance, yeah, how did your guidance for the youth evolved? Yeah, how did it evolve?
How did it evolve? Uh, I think I guess from the in the '90s it was certainly different from when it was when I started in the late '60s and through the '70s and '80s.
Hmm.
I think that the world had kind of changed, and it was more important for my students to understand that it was better off. They needed to make sure they finished high school and went on to college,
Yeah.
because I felt that all of a sudden when I was a high school kid and you graduated, you didn't have to have a college education in order to make a living and have
Hmm.
a wife and a family and
So
buy
it
a house.
wasn't like a big deal like it was later on, right?
Exactly. And
Oh,
all of a
okay.
sudden, as time progressed and this country got more technologically involved,
Oh,
I
okay.
started to have to say, it's more important. And by the way, more important for the young people to continue on with their college educations, especially in certain areas. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
because when I was a kid, the big career choices were law and medicine and engineering. Okay, those
Hmm.
changed from someplace during, I guess, probably during the '80s.
Yeah.
And but and by the way, I'm not a uh, I'm not a kind of a class kind of a person that says, "Oh, you have to be educated." I think I told you before in another podcast. I love my plumber. I love my electrician. They are not college educated people, but man, they know their work and they are making great money,
Yeah.
and they're great, wonderful people to talk to. So
Hmm.
I don't believe everybody needs and should have a college education. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to be educated, but you
Yeah.
can be some of the most incredibly bright people I've ever known, and articulate people, were basically what they call autodidacts. They were self-taught.
Hmm.
They read great works,
Yeah.
great
Hmm.
books and articles, and they were very, very
Self-taught.
aware of what's going on in
Hmm.
the world, and
Hmm.
but they had a different calling for a different career.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I don't have that. In fact, I'm more probably now. I'm even more for, I guess, what they used to call vocational training years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
where you say, okay, look, and certain people just don't uh, have the the nature to be bookish. They have to
Yeah.
work with their
Yeah, I
hands.
am not bookish. I'd rather watch an audio or a video and learn from there. Like I
But
need to
look, you're
see things. Yeah.
yeah, you're a perfect example. I mean,
Hmm.
you're an artist. You're
Yeah.
creative. It's that you do beautiful stuff. And
Yeah.
the fact is, I know guys who, well, again, going back to my father. My father used to tell me, I guess his father or somebody close to him was a cabinet maker.
Hmm.
And among the Italians in the old country, and even in this country,
Yeah.
cabinet making it was an art form really, because
Yeah.
he would say
Yeah.
to me,
Woodwork. Yeah.
he said, "What kind of a carpenter would want to build an ugly looking, cabinet? And in other words, you want that when you're working with it, you want it to be beautiful. You want it to
Yeah.
be smooth and so there was to be a really great cabinet maker, you had to really appreciate the aesthetics of what you were doing.
And it's super time consuming.
Yes, but he would say to me, if you're going to be a cabinet maker, or you're going to be a shoemaker, or you're going to be anything, you
Be
want
the
to be the
best.
best at
Be
that
the
that you can
best.
be. And
Yeah.
that's how I got my feeling about becoming, when I became a teacher. I said, you know what?
Mm.
I backed into this career, but
Hmm.
I got to try to be the best
The
teacher I can
best
be.
teacher you can be. Yeah.
That's what my father would have expected me to do.
Hmm.
So there, I guess we should probably end it, but because me, I could talk to you all day long. So,
Yeah. I mean,
so
we can keep continuing talk, and then I can always just chop this up. So
whatever. But I mean, if there's anything else that you or
yes,
anybody else got?
let me check my little notes here, make sure there's any last questions I would like to ask you. So let's see. Oh, there was one thing that you had mentioned that I wanted to ask you. You said that your mom was living vicariously through you.
Educationally.
Yeah,
In
education.
other words, yeah.
Mhm.
And for my sister, in other words, it was a very important for her that
Mhm.
we got a college education, because she,
Didn't get to go. Ah, I see.
yeah,
Yeah,
she could have gone, she could have gone, but she wasn't able to go because
yeah,
she was
yeah.
taking care of her mother and her siblings. And
Mhm.
she did the right thing, but
Yeah,
she had, forevermore, she had this an unresolved hostility about the life that she had to live.
yeah.
She would have chosen not to have that life. She would
Ah,
have
yeah,
chosen
sure. I
to
mean,
live.
yeah, like a lot of us, like immigrants, like my family, like when we came over here, we're like the first generation. So they want to make sure that, you have to go to college, you have to,
Right. That's right.
succeed, get a great job and all of that because they didn't get to do it. So they want to make sure you do it,
Yeah.
you know?
That's it. And that was part of her deal too. I mean,
Yeah,
she was born here,
yeah.
okay? So was my father, but that background of being children of immigrants and what have you, was very, very big on their mind all the time,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the time, you know.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
and I just want to give people like a possible preview of our next conversation. I would like to talk about next podcast would be the critical race theory. And I want to
wow,
get
you really sprung that on me. I had no clue you were going there. Okay.
I didn't know either. I'm flying by the seat of my pants right here. This is all winging it.
Sure. To
I would
me,
like I would love to get your definition of it so we can talk about it next
yeah,
podcast.
I'll save that for next time. But I have to be honest with you. That's a hoax. That's a political thing. Um, uh, I mean, see, if I start to talk about it, I won't stop. So we'll wait on that.
Yeah.
But
Just your
I've said it.
definition of it, and then we'll talk about it.
I've said it to you before about
Mhm.
those of you who went to Central Islip. You
Mhm.
lived what they're talking about. You lived. Critical race theory is really something it was in law schools where they would talk about how structural racism in this country uh, uh, um, impeded or was involved in uh, keeping minorities, down and keeping them off track in certain ways. Okay, and the reality of it is that the students in Central Islip, you know, they 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 didn't wouldn't have called it the critical race theory, but they knew that, yeah, there is structural racism. Yeah, there's a reason why things are so difficult for us in many ways. Yes, a lot of minorities they're doing really well. They're doctors, they're lawyers, and that's not the point. The point
Yeah.
is that it's made more difficult for lots of reasons. And I mentioned it in a previous podcast about steering.
Yeah.
Steering was a perfect in real estate was a perfect example of what the critical race theory was all about.
And
In
I
fact, I'll tell you
appreciate
another.
that you are, you were a real estate agent and you had firsthand knowlege of this, which just makes it even more
But I'm going to
interesting.
tell you something else that way before that. Uh, I'll tell you one of the most. uh, racist towns on Long Island at the very beginning,
Yeah.
right? And on purpose. It was Levittown.
Mm.
Levittown, they had when they had contracts when they went to do the houses, they had what they called quote restrictive covenants unquote, and
Mm.
those restrictive covenants said basically, black people can't live here.
Wow.
And what was going back to my father was appalled by that, and I'll tell you why.
Mm.
Because
Hmm.
he was a veteran of World War II, and they weren't allowed. And
Oh,
this is when Levittown was starting to be developed.
yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, hey, these black and Latino and other men of color and women, they were fighting for freedom in World War
Yeah.
II,
So
and they were
it's
telling
okay for them to die for your country, but they can't live next to you?
Yeah. And my father, bless him, my father he found that absolutely appalling, absolutely
Hmm.
appalling. But
Yeah.
I'll save that for next time. How's that?
Yeah, yeah. So now whoever's listening, they have a little sneak peek on the exciting next conversation that we are going to have. So, Mr. Schiavo, Captain, thank you so much. And it is always a pleasure to speak with you. And I can't wait for the next time we chat.
Hey, listen, right back at you. And I also want to thank those people since I just realized I forgot that it was live. Okay, but
Yeah,
for
yeah. Yeah,
those
Christian's
people
enjoying this and he really wants this to hear about this next podcast.
I hope so. But a shout out to all of them who have been uh, patiently listening to me.
Yeah.
Remember, this is what's cool. What's cool about this? When I was teaching school, they had to listen to me. Now they don't
Hmm.
have to. They're doing
They
it
don't
because
have
they
you.
want to. So I'm really flattered and gratified by the whole thing. So
Yeah.
until next time, you stay well.
Thank
Okay?
you so much. Till next time. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye bye. Bye, everybody on Facebook.
Man. Bye.
Thank you for listening. And also subscribe, comment, like. If you have any questions for next time from Mrs. Schiavo, add it to the comments. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye. Humongous. I'm super proud of you and all that you've accomplished and all of us. And I really am enjoying this. Oh, Mr. Schiavo says hi because I've done a couple of podcasts with him. So he sends his love.
Hello, Captainess.
He having conversations with him has really opened up ignited a fire in me to like really tell these stories really of all us like little mighties that came from CI